Your call. It will be the last one. We now have live pictures from the floor of the House of Representatives, just 10 minutes away from the opening session and gaveling in. Thanks so much for being with us this morning on the 112th Congress opening day.
your faithful believers. Enkindle within them the fire of divine love, that they may be truly open to respond to your word and the needs of your people. Lord, send forth your Spirit and renew the face of the earth. May the Spirit of the living God descend upon this chamber, that from here may come forth good news for the poor, healing for the brokenhearted, and renewed hope in the nation. Let there go forth a proclamation to the people that captivity is ended, and the action of true politics will set this nation free. By setting single-minded self-interest aside in the search for the common good, may a just society flourish with the gifts of your Spirit and be recognized by others for its equal justice, unity, and peace. Lord, may the 112th Congress of the United States of America be an instrument of your goodness with abiding laws embraced and clarity in policy statements, reaching beyond institutional thinking and public opinion polls. May every human life in this country be renewed with dignity and purpose, so we may truly be the glory given to your name as the free children of God, made in your image and conformed to your saving grace, both now and forever. Amen.
Members-elect and their guests, please remain standing and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. As directed by law, the clerk of the House has prepared the official roll of members-elect. Certificates of election covering 435 seats in the 112th Congress have been received by the Clerk of the House, and the names of those persons whose credentials show that they were regularly elected as representatives in accord with the laws of their respective states or the United States will be called. The representatives-elect will record their presence by electronic device, and their names will be reported in alphabetical order, beginning with the state of Alabama, to determine if a quorum is present. Representatives-elect will have a minimum of 15 minutes to record their presence by electronic device. Representatives-elect who have not obtained their voting ID cards may do so now in the Speaker's lobby.
As mandated by the Constitution, every 2 years, the U.S. House reconvening here for the 112th Congress with a full day of activity, opening ceremonies, the election of the Speaker, and much more throughout the day. Here on C-SPAN live coverage, of course, and in HD for this early part anyway, getting some views that we don't normally see in the U.S. House. As members of the Senate assemble and the call of the House is held, bringing new and old members to the House floor so that they can get underway with the business of the day. Kate Hunter is covering today's opening for Roll Call. She joins us on the phone. Kate Hunter, what's ahead this afternoon in the U.S. House?
Well, today is largely about the pomp and circumstance of bringing in the new Congress. The highlights of today is going to be the election of the new Speaker and adoption of a rules package, a Republican rules package that the conference passed late last night that makes some of the changes to the operations of the House that the Republicans ran on in November.
About the election of the Speaker, it obviously will be presumptive Speaker John Boehner, but there has been some talk that some Democrats may voice displeasure in the leadership of Nancy Pelosi. Have you heard anything more about that?
Well, back in November, there were 43 Democrats that, in a secret ballot vote, now mind you, that was a secret ballot, voted for Heath Shuler, who was an alternate candidate to Nancy Pelosi for minority leader. Mr. Shuler, who's a moderate from North Carolina, has said that he's going to vote for himself today on the floor, which is a public vote, rather than vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker, and that he expects a number of other moderate Democrats to follow suit. A few of his colleagues in the Blue Dog Coalition said back in November that they plan to vote for Mr. Shuler as well. It'll be very interesting to watch where that number comes in, because back in 1997, for instance, when Newt Gingrich was running for Speaker, he was in some ethics problems then, and there were actually 9 Republicans that either voted for someone else or voted present for Speaker. That's sort of a recent high watermark. It'll be interesting to see where today's number comes in as compared to that.
Why is this debate ahead and this vote on the rules package you said was approved by the GOP conference last night? Why is it important or interesting for viewers this afternoon?
Well, it's an early test. It's an early kind of shot across the bow from between Democrats and Republicans about how this debate is going to play out, how the debates are going to play out in the next Congress. Democrats are already pushing back pretty hard against the rules package today. They're accusing Republicans of backing off of some of the pledges that they made to voters during the last campaign. For instance, Republicans had talked about a requirement, an attendance requirement, posting attendance at committee hearings, that sort of thing. They've now moved back off of that. So even though today is largely ceremonial in a lot of ways, the debate over the rules package, which comes right after the vote on the Speaker, is actually going to be pretty partisan. And so I think straight out of the gate we're going to be seeing a partisan clash over the very rules that are going to govern the operations of the House for the next 2 years.
Kate Hunter of Roll Call, thanks for that preview.
Thanks for having me.
Congressman Jim Moran there on the left of the screen as members assemble in this roll call of members. And by about 12:40 or so, we expect the House to move on with the ceremony, the election of the Speaker. We will hear from John Boehner, of course, and then later on this afternoon that debate and vote on the new rules package. Live coverage of the House on C-SPAN. John Boehner, the incoming speaker, working his way, meeting with members, shaking hands, posing for pictures as the 112th Congress, the U.S. House, gaveling in on this January the 5th. The likely speaker will be nominated here shortly. What's happening now is a roll call of members, a quorum call to bring members to the House floor. And following this, at about 12:40 Eastern or so, 12:45, we expect the name of John Boehner to be placed in nomination for Speaker of the House. That will be followed by a manual roll call of votes and the election of the Speaker. And later this afternoon, we will hear from John Boehner as he takes over the speakership. Also later this afternoon, a vote, and here a look also what you don't see often on C-SPAN, you don't really regularly see on our House coverage. That is the tally board, and the P there meaning present, as members are registering their presence in the U.S. House. You don't see that as often because our normal coverage of the U.S. House is provided, the cameras are provided by the House Gallery. On this opening day of the U.S. House, in the 112th Congress, you're seeing additional HD coverage by our C-SPAN cameras, and it's a different look, one we don't often see. Again, only on sort of opening days or a joint session of Congress, and this will continue throughout much of the afternoon. Again, going back to the rules package, the House will vote later today, debate and vote on the new rules as the Republicans take over the House now with 242 Republicans, 153 Democrats. Republicans get to set the rules for the management of the U.S. House. That debate ahead this afternoon, sometime probably in the 2 o'clock hour.
representatives-elect in the chamber who wish to record their presence? If not, all time has expired. "434 representatives-elect have recorded their presence. A quorum is present. Credentials, regular in form, have been received showing the election of the Honorable Pedro R. Periluisi as Resident Commissioner from the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico for the term of 4 years beginning January 3, 2009. The Honorable Eleanor Holmes Norton as Delegate from the District of Columbia. The Honorable Madeline Z. Bordallo as Delegate from Guam. The Honorable Donna M. Christensen as Delegate from the Virgin Islands. The Honorable Eni F. H. Faleomavea as Delegate from American Samoa. The Honorable Gregorio Sablon as Delegate from the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. Pursuant to law and precedent, the next order of business is the election of the Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 112th Congress. Nominations are now in order. The House will be in order. The clerk recognizes the gentleman from the great state of Texas, Mr. Hensel.
Madam Clerk, every Congress represents a sacred responsibility to write a new and greater chapter in our Republic's history. Be it providence or destiny, a unique man of uniquely American values is now called to lead this effort. At a time when far too many of our countrymen remain unemployed, a former small businessman will lead the House to pass policies to encourage job creation. At a time when all agree our nation is on an unsustainable fiscal course, a fiscal reformer will ensure that this House never mortgages the torch of liberty in order to pay our debts. At a time when too many doubt that their children can enjoy a brighter future in our country, he has lived the American dream and will protect it for our posterity like few others before him. This proud son of Ohio, one of 12 children born into a working-class family, has waited tables, mopped floors, tended bar, worked construction, worked his way to a college degree at night school, led a thriving company, and through his faith, his hard work, his values, is now poised to become the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. He knows firsthand that unlimited opportunity can only arise from limited constitutional government. Madam Clerk, as Chairman of the Republican Conference, I am directed by the unanimous vote of that conference to present for election to the office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 112th Congress the name of the Honorable John A. Boehner, a representative-elect of the state of Ohio. Y'all clap, y'all clap.
The clerk now recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, as chairman of the Democratic Caucus, I am directed by vote of that caucus to present for election to the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 112th Congress a person that gives me great honor and privilege, who has led with decency and dignity. I submit on behalf of this caucus the name of the Honorable Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi, a representative from the great state of California.
The names of the Honorable John A. Boehner, a representative-elect from the state of Ohio, and the Honorable Nancy Pelosi, a representative-elect from the state of California, have been placed in nomination. Are there other nominations? There being no further nominations, the clerk appoints the following tellers: the gentleman from California, Mr. Lundgren; the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Brady; the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Capter; the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Ross-Layton. The tellers will come forward and take their seats at the desk in front of the Speaker's rostrum. The roll will now be called, and those responding to their names will indicate by surname the nominee of their choosing. The reading clerk will now call the roll.
Mr. Ackerman. Mr. Ackerman votes Pelosi. Mrs. Adams. Mrs. Adams votes Boehner. Adderholt. Boehner. Aiken. Boehner. Alexander. Boehner. Altmeyer. Schuler. Amash. Boehner. Andrews. Pelosi. Austria.
Gentleman from Ohio, John Boehner.
Boehner. Baca. Pelosi. Bachmann. Boehner. Backus. Boehner. Baldwin. Pelosi. Barletta. Boehner. Barrow. Lewis of Georgia. Bartlett. Boehner. Barton of Texas. Boehner. Bass of California. Pelosi. Bass of New Hampshire. Boehner. Becerra. Pelosi. Beneshek. Boehner. Berg. Boehner. Berkeley. Pelosi. Berman. Pelosi. Biggert. Boehner. Bilbray. Boehner. Bilrakis. Boehner. Bishop of Georgia. Present. Bishop of New York. Pelosi. Bishop of Utah. Boehner. Black. Boehner. Blackburn. Boehner. Blumenauer. Pelosi. Boehner. Boehner. Bonner. Boehner. Bono Mack. Boehner. Boren. Schuler. Boswell. Pelosi. Bustani. Boehner. Brady of Pennsylvania. Pelosi. Brady of Texas. Boehner. Braley of Iowa. Pelosi. Brooks. Boehner. Brown of Georgia. Boehner. Brown of Florida. Pelosi. Buchanan. Boehner. Bouchon. Boehner. Burkle. Boehner. Burgess. Boehner. Burton of Indiana. Boehner. Butterfield. Pelosi. Calvert. Boehner. Camp of Michigan. Boehner. Campbell of California. Boehner. Canseco. Boehner. Cantor. Boehner. Capito. Boehner. Capps. Pelosi. Capuano. Pelosi. Cardoza. Costa. Carnahan. Pelosi. Carney. Pelosi. Carson of Indiana. Pelosi. Carter. Boehner. Cassidy. Boehner. Castor of Florida. Pelosi. Shabbat. Boehner. Chapitz. Boehner. Chandler. Pelosi. Chu. Pelosi. Cicilline. Pelosi. Clark of Michigan. Pelosi. Clark of New York. Pelosi. Clay. Pelosi. Cleaver. Okay. Clyburn. Pelosi. Coble. Boehner. Kaufman of Colorado. Boehner. Cohen. Pelosi. Cohen. Pelosi. Cole of Oklahoma. Boehner. Conaway. Boehner. Connolly of Virginia. Pelosi. Conyers. Pelosi. Cooper. Schuler. Costa. Cardoza. Okay. Costello. Pelosi. Courtney. Pelosi. Kravac. Boehner. Crawford. Boehner. Crenshaw. Boehner. Kritz. Pelosi. Crowley. Pelosi. Cuellar. Pelosi. Culberson. Boehner. Cummings. Pelosi. Davis of California. Pelosi. Davis of Illinois. Pelosi. Davis of Kentucky. Boehner. DeFazio. DeFazio. DeGette. Pelosi. DeLauro. Pelosi. Denham.
John Boehner.
Boehner. Dent. Boehner. Desjardins. Boehner. Deutsch. Pelosi. Diaz-Balart. Boehner. Dix. Pelosi. Dingell. Pelosi. Doggett. Pelosi. Dold. Boehner. Donnelly of Indiana. Schuler. Doyle. Pelosi. Dreyer. Boehner. Duffy. Boehner. Duncan of South Carolina. Boehner. Duncan of Tennessee. Boehner. Edwards. Pelosi. Ellison. Pelosi. Elmers. Boehner. Emerson. Emerson. Boehner. Engel. Pelosi. Eshoo. Pelosi. Farenthold. Boehner. Farr.
Distinguished woman from San Francisco, Nancy
Pelosi. Fatah. Pelosi. Filner. Pelosi. Fincher. Boehner. Fitzpatrick. Boehner. Flake. Boehner. Fleischman. Boehner. Fleming. Boehner. Flores. Boehner. Forbes. Boehner. Fortenberry. Boehner. Fox. Boehner. Frank of Massachusetts. Pelosi. Franks of Arizona. Boehner. Frelinghuysen. Boehner. Fudge. Pelosi. Gallegly. Gallegly. Boehner. Garamendi. Pelosi. Gardner. Boehner. Garrett. Boehner. Gerlach. Boehner. Gibbs. Boehner. Gibson. Boehner. Giffords. Lewis of Georgia. Gingrey of Georgia. Boehner. Gomert. Gomert. Gonzalez. Pelosi. Goodlatte. Boehner. Gosar. Boehner. Gowdy. Boehner. Granger. Boehner. Graves of Georgia. Boehner. Graves of Missouri. Boehner. Al Green. Pelosi. Jean Green. Pelosi. Griffin of Arkansas. Boehner. Griffith of Virginia. Boehner. Grijalva. Pelosi. Grimm. Boehner. Ginta. Boehner. Guthrie. Boehner. Gutierrez. Pelosi. Hall. Boehner. Hanabusa. Pelosi. Hanna. Boehner. Harmon. Pelosi. Harper. Boehner. Harris. Boehner. Hartzler. Boehner. Hastings of Florida. Pelosi. Hastings of Washington. Boehner. Hayworth. Boehner. Heck. Boehner. Heinrich. Pelosi. Heller. Boehner. Hensarling. Boehner. Herger. Herger. Boehner. Herrera Butler. Boehner. Higgins. Pelosi. Himes. Pelosi. Hinchey. Pelosi. Hinojosa. Pelosi. Hirono. Pelosi. Holden. Schuler. Holt. Pelosi. Honda. Pelosi. Hoyer. Pelosi. Fuelskamp. Boehner. Huizenga. Boehner. Boehner. Hunter. Boehner. Hurt. Boehner. Inslee. Pelosi. Israel. Pelosi. Issa. Boehner. Jackson of Illinois. Pelosi. Jackson Lee of Texas. Pelosi. Jenkins. Boehner. Johnson of Georgia. Pelosi. Johnson of Illinois. Johnson of Illinois. Johnson of Ohio.
John Boehner.
Boehner. Eddie Bernice Johnson. Pelosi. Sam Johnson. Boehner. Jones. Boehner. Jordan. Boehner. Captor. Pelosi. Keating. Pelosi. Kelly. Boehner. Kildee. Pelosi. Kind. Cooper. King of Iowa. Boehner. King of New York. Boehner. Kingston. Boehner. Kinzinger. Boehner. Kissel. Schuler. Klein. Boehner. Kucinich. Pelosi. Labrador. Boehner. Lamborn. Boehner. Lance. Boehner. Landry. Boehner. Langevin. Pelosi. Langford. Boehner. Larson of Washington. Pelosi. Larson of Connecticut. Pelosi. Latham. Boehner. LaTourette.